And welcome into the Card Central Postgame Show. I'm Sara Dayley alongside Brenden Schaeffer. And once again, the Birds falling short to the Marlins. Unfortunately, their seventh shutout in the month of July. I wouldn't say a lot of happy flights or happy things to be discussing here. A couple of trades and a couple of moves by the Birds today, right before first pitch, Brenden. And a lot of things happening here for the Cardinals, but unfortunately, they just still can't put something in the W column.
Yeah, a lot of things happening, none of them good. Is kind of the way it feels right now. The Helsley trade is obviously, I would have said bittersweet, because in a world in which the Cardinals get a return that fans are excited about, that's the sweet part. Bitter to see a guy like Hells go, who, in another world would have been a Cardinal for life and would have been happy to have stuck around with the team. But the team right now is not really in a place where it feels it's going to spend the type of money it'll take to lock up Ryan Helsley or any reliever for that matter, because they're kind of in the middle in the standings, and I just don't know how quickly they are ready to turn things around and get back to the top of the payroll department and things of that nature. And so Aaron commenting here, they were handed 2 losses. They didn't get anything for Helsley, and they gave up in the game. I will say, I know it is a real serious implication when you say, they gave up. They look like they're kind of just rolling over. But, man, I don't know what else to say for 2 games in a row where offensively they haven't been able to get anything done. That's the best characterization. Is it kind of like going through the motions? Maybe that's a better way to put it, when you obviously know that these guys care, but it feels like maybe their souls are being ripped from them a little bit when you know what's coming over the period before the trade deadline. And Helsley was the leader of that bullpen, and there could be more guys that they care about that they know help them win games that follow Ryan Helsley out the door. So that's sort of the implication. You actually got a pretty good outing, Sara, from Miles Mikolas tonight, but it doesn't matter if you can't score any runs. We'll probably get into more of the merits of the trade and what they got back. And look, that won't be something we can even really know by the end of the night. It's going to be a while before we see the guys that they got back for Helsley at the big league level. But it does feel kind of like a bit of a somber day in Cardinal Nation at the very least.
Yeah, I think Cardinal Nation, like you said, was looking for a big move, right? Or something that's at least going to put the quote unquote rebuild year back towards that momentum of rebuilding. And when you kind of do what is viewed, from what I've seen so far, a neutral trade, that's not a lot of hope, I guess, or a lot of excitement surrounded. And like you said, it's going to take some time. You have 2 minor league prospects, right? Top 15 from the Mets rather, coming over. And then you have one player that has actually had a little bit of time. But when your starting pitching is scuffling, your offense is scuffling, you can't really win if neither one is really jiving. And, like you said, Mikolas, 6 innings tonight, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, no walks, 5 Ks. He had a decent outing, but when you don't have run support, you can't really win with a 0 and a big goose egg on the board.
Yeah, I mean, quality start, even when you get the type of outing Mikolas put together, you like it, but it's just kind of a thought that goes on the back burner with everything else that has been going on over the past handful of hours, really. And I look at Cal Quantrill, he is a pitcher coming in with an ERA above 5. He's not left-handed, so there's not that excuse, or again, I don't really even like the excuse word, because sometimes it's just an explanation. But there's no way to explain other than, man, they're just kind of going through the motions. That's the way it felt to me watching the offense. You had a couple of times on base by Donovan, a couple of times by Burleson, a couple of times by Sajacy. You scatter a hit or a walk elsewhere in your lineup, and that's about all she wrote against a guy that you should be able to do more against. And 3 good pitchers coming out of the Marlins bullpen. You never really were out of the game if you could find a way to get some guys on base and maybe send them in, but it just wasn't meant to be. Another night where they announce between 20 and 21,000 for the attendance at Busch. It's been mentioned that, it's maybe going to be more of a ghost town than it's already been. And we know the attendance has been down. So, yeah, it's kind of brutal. And again, Joe and I talked for about a half an hour after the Helsley trade was first reported. And, we're obviously going to continue to learn more things about the guys that were brought in. But I think from an archetype, from a philosophical standpoint, what you don't love about it is that the 3 players they brought in for Helsley, who was really supposed to be your biggest trade chip,
Right,
are guys that aren't close to the big leagues. A guy that played in high A, another guy that's played in high A, and a third guy that played in high A. All guys from the Brooklyn high A team for the New York Mets. Nobody that's even remotely close to the big leagues. That's a little bit of a frustration. And one of those things that, if this was the best that there was to come from the trade deadline, it almost hampers maybe a little bit of your optimism for what tomorrow could bring when you kind of feel like you just traded your best chip and that's what you got for him. Not that these young kids can't turn into something, Sarah, but it's just the timeline. They're pretty far
Yeah.
away from able to do so.
And we have a lot of prospects in our organization that are still not quite there or ready yet,
Yeah.
right? So it's not like our form system is failing or falling short. Like we have some of those already in the queue, ready to go, hopefully in the next year or so, or maybe next season, whatever the timeline may be. But I mean,
Mhm.
that just they're looking for something to make a difference now. And unfortunately, this wasn't really giving folks exactly what they wanted. So again, we don't know exactly all the details behind it, but it could be something, in the future that we don't see. And that's why they make the move. Clearly, that's why we're in the position we're in and they're doing what they're doing. But Aaron Dotson saying, don't care, I want prospects to use now. Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like you want something
Yeah.
to make a difference now and to turn the heads and to put the Cardinals in the right direction. But that's just not the move they made. Do you see any other major moves, or do you see something happening right now that may happen the next 24 hours or less than 24 hours?
It's difficult to believe that the type of move that Aaron describes there with this comment is coming if it wasn't going to be Helsley that could net you that type of prospect. I want to draw an example to the Yohan Duran trade that he was the closer of the Minnesota Twins was sent from the Twins to the Phillies. And this happened 20 minutes maybe before the Helsley stuff started coming down. And so I kind of thought, maybe there's a bit of a connection there. Is it possible the Cardinals were talking with Philly about Helsley? Yeah, certainly that could be a possibility. But they end up getting Duran, who ends up netting the Twins a really nice pitching prospect in Mick Abel. He's a guy that's had around a 5 ERA when he's seen time at the bigs this year. But in AAA, he's got like a 2.3 ERA. He's a good strikeout arm and somebody that, like, obviously the Cardinals didn't get Mick Abel. But if they had, he would have been a guy that, comes into spring training in February of 2026 down in Jupiter, Florida, and is vying for a spot in the rotation. That's the type of prospect that I think once somebody, the fan base saw that Abel was going in a deal for a relief pitcher and a closer, they're like, oh man, the Helsley market, you kind of get a little bit excited about what that could bring. But then you realize, okay, Duran has multiple years of team control. Helsley is a 2-month rental. Duran has better stats this year than Helsley, a little better postseason pedigree than Helsley, to where, the team that's getting him feels like he can really make a difference for them in October. And in the Phillies case, their closer Alvarado had an 80-game suspension where even after he comes back, he's not able to pitch in the postseason. He won't be eligible. So we've known for a number of weeks and months that they were going to need another reliever, but they end up getting a guy that, look, they paid up for him. But the Cardinals, just as much as it feels like it was attainable because, well, it just happened 20 minutes ago. Why couldn't we get somebody like that could join our rotation here soon? Helsley didn't have the level of value that Duran had due to the changing of the team control factor, and that Helsley just hadn't had really quite as strong of a season as Duran either. And so while I think it's a fair thing to want, and I would have said, look, man, if there's another guy like Mick Abel out there on the market, not to say he's going to turn into a stud, but a controllable starting arm that could be ready within the next, 12 months, those are the kinds of guys that I would have said, yeah, you can take Helsley, you could take Maton with him. You can rebuild your whole bullpen, one-stop shop. For the Cardinals to, move Helsley, but not feel like they got anything in that category back for him. Plus, Sarah, the best name that they got in terms of prospect rankings, I believe Jesus Baez, which is the infielder, the shortstop, he ranks highly. I think it was a top 100 prospect per Baseball America coming into the season. However, you're trading Helsley, you want to get an arm back that really flashed. And the two arms are kind of the secondary pieces in the trade where you're thinking, oh, okay, we got another position player as kind of the main guy in the deal. Yeah, maybe he turns into something, but gosh, the pitching is what we notice more often than not. Now, maybe tonight it was position players that didn't get hits and didn't support Michaelis. But I think that's another aspect, Sarah, that people are maybe kind of frustrated by, that they moved Helsley and they didn't get a pitcher back that they really can feel like they can hang their hat on as far as a prospect goes.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. So if you are just joining us, the final score tonight, 2-0 Marlins over the Birds. They did have a chance in the bottom of the fifth with bases juiced. Downey sat down for the second out, and then Herrera grounds out to leave him loaded. And I think it was 6 or 7 runners left in scoring position tonight. Cards just couldn't capitalize, even with an opportunity with plenty of outs coming up to the plate. Jeremy Hodge here. Can't blame Michaelis for no, you can't. I mean, he had a great outing.
More than fine.
Yeah. And
yeah,
everyone's, has their ups and downs with players as they should. But again, run support's huge, right? A goose egg's not going to get it done. I did see earlier in the comments, Sean of St. Loserville said everyone wanted Helsley gone. Now he is, and they want him back, ? I can't with this fan base. It's unbearable. We're not saying we wanted him back. I mean, not saying we wanted him to go and necessarily, but it's like, if you're going to do the trade, make it something that we feel is valuable to the team. I guess that is a good we feel, because clearly they made the move, so they felt it was a good move. But just something like you said, an immediate result or immediate maybe added to what the Cardinals are dealing with right now. So,
and I didn't expect him to get a big leaguer for Ryan Helsley, but I thought there was a world in which I thought maybe you get a prospect who's at least at AA, AAA, to where within the next calendar year you feel like you got somebody that can make an impact, or you at least get to see debut. And I think we know pretty clearly, I guess I can't say clearly, the kid Nate Dom, that is a 22-year-old, was a third rounder in 2024. And, depending on the way that he profiles moving forward, he's been starting in the minors for the Mets organization. But sometimes guys, if they do end up shifting to relief, they can traverse through the system a little bit more quickly. But, when you see other teams getting a starting pitcher, a prospect for their top reliever, it's just natural to go, well, I kind of wanted that too. And I don't know that the Cardinals ended up with that. And so that's understandably disappointing. But to Sean of St. Loserville's other point, if you're expecting a haul for Helsley when he's only a rental to the Mets, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I understand why people had hope that maybe you'd get more or something a little bit closer. And like the other part of this, Sarah, is there's no rule that says you have to get 3 players back when you trade somebody.
Right.
You could trade for one, maybe more solid piece that's a little bit closer to showing up if you wanted to. And look, maybe not with the Mets. Maybe that's not what the Mets were offering. And hey, maybe the Cardinals saw the relief market moving a little bit fast for their liking, and they didn't want to get left at the end without a dance partner, because as much as you love Ryan Helsley, he's not going to be on the team next year. And so you have to get something for him in a year where this team is going nowhere fast. Totally understand that, but it just seems like you kind of settle almost for a package that values quantity over quality, which is not me saying that these kids cannot turn into quality players for the Cardinal organization down the line. But we're talking about 3 guys at high A. It's just very difficult to project what they will look like in 2026, 2027, or even beyond that. And so I can see both sides of the argument. Optically, what it kind of suggests is, okay, you had your best trade chip and you moved him for guys that are 2-3 years away, seemingly. What does that suggest about the way that the Cardinals are planning to contend within the next couple of years? There are folks drawing those types of conclusions as well tonight.
And being that far from, like you said, being in the show, there's injury risk. I mean, there's just so many things, right? I mean, they're in single A, high A. So you've got a couple time, and that just risks a lot. I mean, we've seen some of the Cardinals top prospects go down with Tommy John and other things. Clearly that's not ever planned, but it's just like when you're that far away, you would just think it'd be a little closer to being a step up, like you said. So Cardinal Nation clearly venting some of their frustrations. You've seen the comments here. They're pouring in about a lot of things and opinions. There was one up here that was talking about Aaron Dodson, I'm so tired of hearing Bloom will be different. This tells me he's just going to be a cheaper Mo.
Well, I don't know why it would tell us that, because we don't know that he's involved.
He's not.
Maybe he's in the room. I would hope that it's, hey, we're looking at moving to the Mets. Is there a guy? Is there a couple players that you think? Hopefully, Sarah, in like any just universe, there's a conversation like that happens, that Mozeliak's not just, stiff arming Chaim Bloom and saying, "This is my deadline." Like, I realistically don't think that that's what Mo is doing. I'm sure there was some synergy going on there. But yes, to the point that I think is important to address, anything that I have seen reported, and I don't know any different, John Mozeliak is running this trade deadline for the St. Louis Cardinals. And so I don't think that we can draw conclusions about Chaim Bloom yet, good ones or bad ones. We can look at it and say, well, he came from Tampa, and that organization with that ownership group, and Chaim Bloom was there. Well, they never re-signed players, and they always traded them, and they took him to ARB. Like, okay, we have some maybe data points that we can look to, but we really don't know, and we haven't been able to ask him either. We haven't really had that opportunity with Chaim Bloom to pick his brain and to be able to see how he responds to certain questions or philosophical quandaries of like the direction of things. So I think I understand the impetus to want to rush to a judgment of like, this is what I think of the new guy. But when we haven't heard of him and when we don't really have strong reason to believe that he was at the forefront of this trade deadline or is, since it's not over yet, I hesitate to do that. But again, I'm understanding that there will be fans that say, hey, don't care what you say. This is the narrative that I am running with.
Yeah. And of course, Snips 127. Thank you, Bill DeWitt Jr., for turning this team into the Reds and the Pirates. Let's not get carried away. I mean, that we're not completely.
Hey,
I
the
don't
Reds and
think
the Pirates
that,
at least made a trade today. I mean, they
right.
traded with each other. I want to see the
Yeah.
Cardinals trade. I want chaos at this point, Sarah. Like, people are already pissed off. All right, you want to really set them off? Go get a prospect from the Cubs, trade them a good reliever, and just watch the world burn. I'm ready to see it. And guess what? You should be willing to do that if you're the St. Louis Cardinals. If you think the Cubs have a prospect that can help you win within the next few years, yeah, you should trade him Phil Maton if they want. I would not hesitate to trade within the division when I'm talking about mostly rental players at this point. That, yeah, you might have to see him in September or something like that when you still face the Cubs a few more times. But overall, you have to really think more about what's the benefit of my team long term rather than, I don't want to help out a rival. I kind of commend the Pirates and Reds for having a willingness to hook up on that deal that they made today. I don't know who it's going to help the most in the end, but credit to the Reds for trying. They're picking up a third baseman, and Brian Hayes could be a Gold Glover again this year. And, the Pirates are trying to perennially restock, rebuild what they've got going on there in Pittsburgh. So that's just my general thought is like, man, I would love to see the Cardinals expand their horizons and be willing to trade with anybody that's got something for them that could prove to be useful.
Yeah. So back to kind of who you want to maybe look at getting rid of or who you want to keep. Who would be like your franchise tag, so to speak, for Major League like for this team? Who would you tag that you would not want to, that you could definitely hold on to for the next couple of years, maybe past their contract, that you just know it has to be the leader, has to be one of those just characters in the clubhouse that the franchise hangs on to, that they really have to rely on, lean on, look to, that can contribute and also just be, both on and off the field, one of those guys? Like who would you tag for that?
Yeah, I mean, I have been outspoken and vocal about the direction I believe the Cardinals need to go with this, but Brendan Donovan is somebody that I am offering a contract extension to in the offseason. I am not trading him like Ruddy here would suggest the Cardinals should do. I look at this Cardinals team and I say, yeah, I'm seeing the writing on the wall that 2026 is not going to be the year that they are ready to really go back all in and do a bunch of spending and try to contend and be in the middle of their contention window. I think it's going to be at least another year after that. And look, with the CBA negotiations that's coming down the line at the end of 2026, it could be that they kind of wait for the dust to settle on all of that before they really go back into spending in a major way. All that being said, I don't think a contract extension for Brendan Donovan would be too substantial of a sum where there's any way really to regret it at the end of the day. 28 years old, so you're talking about playing him next 2 years under arbitration, 29, 30 years old, and you can tack on a few years of free agency where he'll still be in those relative prime years. I don't think it's a bank breaking kind of conversation. And yeah, there you go. And I believe that when you say those qualities of a clubhouse leader and a guy that can kind of bridge the gap from one era of Cardinals baseball to the one that everybody is pining for and looking forward to, I still think Brendan Donovan's that guy. So he'd be my list of kind of players that are a little bit closer to free agency, where in theory, at times we've seen organizations move those types of players. Once you've only got a couple of years of team control, if you don't think you're signing that guy, you could try to maximize the return in a trade. That would not be the direction that I would go. And by the way, if you're worried about John Mozeliak making the wrong moves, if he's the guy in charge of the deadline, you want to take your best player and have John Mozeliak trade him away for a package that resembles the one you got for Helsley. If you're not thrilled about it, I'm just putting that out there that maybe that wouldn't be the right course of action necessarily. I'm going Donovan. For me, guys like Mason Wynn, Victor Scott, like I think they're under team control for a good long while. They're young, good defenders, exuberant guys that I would look to be keeping around for sure. You hope that the bat develops for both of them a little bit more than what we've seen. But I also think, they can be centerpieces or at least kind of on the side, ready for when eventually, ideally, you're either able to spend for it or trade for it when it comes to a big-time bat. Maybe you develop it in the likes of a J.J. Weatherholt, and you find out a way to get some more middle-order pop in this lineup. I don't know if he's going to be that ultimate power hitter, but he's a guy that people are rightfully excited about. So I look at some of those types of names, Sara, and that's really who stands out to me. And then, like, some of the names that you're leaving out, all right, he's on the injured list right now, but Lars Nootbaar, we don't really know the future for him, and he's in that same boat with Donovan where if he is not going to be an extension candidate, you do start to think about trade, I think. They're moving Herrera to the outfield right now. We've seen him a couple of times this week and left. Look, if you trust his bat, that's one fewer spot for an outfielder to play, and that could be Lars Nootbaar. That could be, I mean, Jordan Walker. We've got to see more from him the rest of the season. No chance in hell I'm trading him this week because you're starting to see better things from him, and I just frankly think his value is about as low as it possibly could go. And so what would be the point of that is to, let somebody else potentially recoup the value on Walker. No, I want to see him the rest of the season. But then you get to the offseason, and you do have to make some decisions. You can't fit Nootbaar, Herrera, Burleson, and Walker all in the same outfield, sharing left field and right field. There's going to have to be some push and pull to that. I just don't know if any of those types of trades happen this week, Sara, where it's like the guys that you could conceivably move, a Nootbaar, maybe a Gorman, are on the injured list and probably don't have a ton of value to the point that you would be willing to pull the trigger on that.
James Shanks saying need a bat that can hit 40 or more home runs and at least two need guys that can hit 300. So I think you kind of word that little off there, but talking about just needing some power at the plate, right? Something that's going to be solid and consistent, because we haven't really seen that either out of anyone that's been not on a little stint on the IL or IR and then coming back, maybe their bat's not as hot, or then they go on a different swing. And it just, there's no one that's been a consistent power hitter, right? We don't have that. And there really hasn't been one at all this season for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the leaderboard for the team in home runs, it's that number in the low teens, 13, 14, whatever the number is at this point in time. They just have not necessarily had that type of guy. And it's been a minute since they've had that type of guy. So you're looking to try to develop that or come up with that any other which way that you can, and kind of clearing the deck as well to be able to get a look at some of the players that could potentially turn into that. Like, does Nolan Arenado get moved over the next, whatever it is now, 20 hours remaining before the trade deadline? That would be a name that if he is willing to take a move somewhere, I would not hesitate to do it. And I'm not all too concerned with the return at this point, because I feel like, again, if you're looking at 2026 and saying, I don't know, that's not really our year with the way that the moves are shaken out, then allow for Arenado to have another crack at maybe rectifying the decision that he made in the spring, which was to decline the trade to Houston, where the Cardinals would have gotten a decent chunk of his salary eaten, and they would have been able to get some pieces back for him. At this point, it's just like, can you get him somewhere where he's happy to go and you can kind of clear the deck a little bit for Gorman? And if it doesn't work out with Gorman, then you're looking at a guy like Weatherholt potentially coming in and maybe playing third early next season. Those are the types of things that I would look for this week. But yeah, it's going to be a minute before I think the Cardinals can come up with that next true middle of the order power bat. And if he's not already on the roster, you don't necessarily see him coming. I think Weatherholt's going to be a really good complete player, but is he going to be a 30 home run guy? Yeah, probably not. I don't think that's really his profile.
What point do you see JJ making his debut? Do you think that'll be early next year? Do you think what's kind of your thoughts on that? Because clearly he's doing really well towards the end of this AAA season, but then you have all off season, spring training, and coming up is going to be a whole different mix, right?
Yeah, I hesitate to bring him into this mix right now if you're thinking at the end of 2025, because it's just not looking like it's going to be as competitive as, it had been in the early portion. Although I will say, as a caveat to that, Mason Wynn in 2023 was called up for that cup of coffee. You go from mid-August to the end. You make sure it's fewer days than you would need to exhaust his rookie eligibility. You don't give him enough at-bats to exhaust his rookie eligibility. Wynn was able to get his feet wet and then come in as the starter at shortstop in 2024. There could be some value to something like that. I just don't know if the Cardinals are willing to do it that quickly with Weatherholt. I would be fine with it. It would not come, though, until mid to maybe a little bit on the latter end of August before that can even be considered. But if it's not this year, yeah, I think he's coming into spring training trying to win a job. But I would also look at the roster and say, did they trade, 2 or 3 of the 12 or so position players that are kind of clogging things up right now? A lot of them we really do like, but you can't have them all and then go into next year with them all and saying, yeah, we're going to continue to kind of, feel our way through this process. You have to kind of put your chips on the guys that you're going to keep and that you're going to stand behind. And the ones that you're not, I think you need to be able to move them for some semblance of value, knowing that Weatherholt is up and coming. He's not the only reason you do that. You just have to kind of clear the deck to know, here's my starters. Here's where I can sell to a free agent bench bat. Like, this is going to be your role. We'll pay you a few $1,000,000 to do it. Like, those are the types of things that I think could be coming within the next couple of years. Hopefully those trades are happening within the next few months.
Yep, I couldn't agree more on that, with maybe giving him a little bit slight chance, but then hopefully next season, like you said, competing for a spot on that starting roster. So nothing beats relaxing on a hot summer day and watching baseball. Of course, the temps here are cooling off, thank goodness, but the simplest way to get in the action is to download the Pick Six app from DraftKings. It's crazy simple. Just pick more or less of the stats, or two for more of your favorite players, and boom, you're in the mix of big cash prizes. Pick Six is available right here in Missouri. Don't miss out on the fun. Don't settle for smaller payout. Switch to Pick Six, and right now, new customers can get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos.
All right, Sean of St. Loserville bringing us back. Bring up the kids to play and see what they can do, but leave them feeling defeated with all the losing in the process. They want to play with a chance of contributing to winning. Well, there's that, but I also feel like if they're going to play and want to contribute, they can prove their power, right? If they're not going to come in and win collectively as a team, they can still perform as an individual. Not that you want to like wedge that gap of independent play versus team play, but opportunity is opportunity. So
yeah. Well, I mean, and baseball is an individual sport too. Like it is a team sport, but you're up there facing the pitcher by yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to need to be able to beat that guy when you're at the plate. In the field, obviously, a little bit of a different story. This is a narrative that I think is pervasive, very popular among Cardinals fans. Bring up the kids, see what they can do. I'm tired of these old guys. Tell me, other than J.J. Weatherholt, who you're talking about. I would say probably J.J. Weatherholt. Nathan Church, people probably want to see him a little bit. Maybe they think Jimmy Crooks is ready. I don't believe he is. I don't believe the organization believes that he is. Again, people don't like Pajes, and so maybe they think they should just be replacing him with Jimmy Crooks. I don't believe that is something that they are looking at Crooks and his readiness to do. I think it'll be a big offseason for Jimmy Crooks to kind of show behind the plate that he's ready to take on all that it entails when you're going to become the St. Louis Cardinals starting catcher, if that's something that could be in his future. So I think it'll be a big spring for him. But like, I don't look at this organization and say they've got a bunch of kids that are being held back right now. No, they've got Weatherholt that they drafted last year, who's going to be, like I said, fighting for a spot at the latest. It's going to be spring of 2026 that he's got a chance to earn one. It wouldn't floor me if they moved him up in late August this year. But like I said, if you're selling off, do you want to bring him into that environment? That's the point that Sean is making here. So like a lot of things that go into that, but I just don't think that they've got these top prospects that are just, knocking on the glass ceiling and ready to break through. They don't have that. That's just not the state that their minor league system is in, for better or worse. And look, it is worse. You'd rather have those types of guys coming up. But to be clear, if you're going to bring up the kids to play, they have to trade away and get some value for some of the guys on the roster, because when it comes to their starting lineup, they don't have a bunch of bums. Like, they have a bunch of guys who are solid. Some of them might be underperforming, but there's value to all of them. I'm not talking about like Garrett Hampson off your bench. I'm talking about the guys who actually play and start. Those are guys that, if you're going to move them aside for somebody younger that you want to get a look at, it's all well and good. You're not just going to let that guy go. You're going to have to be strategic in a way that gets some value for some of these players, which is precisely what I'm advocating for. Whether it happens over the next day or it happens in November, I think the Cardinals absolutely need that. And hopefully, we don't know yet if he'll be successful, but hopefully Chaim Bloom is, removed enough from the situation where he's now familiarized himself with maybe who should stay and who should go, because he's been watching for the last couple of years. But he's also not the guy that drafted these players. He didn't bring them in. So he doesn't have that attachment where he won't be able to do the difficult thing of trading some of them. I think it's a good balance that hopefully he will bring this offseason.
So Mason Wynn getting the night off, getting a little bit of rest, but we've had a couple of Sajasi comments here. Couple saying that he played a good short tonight. Joseph saying that he disappoints me. He's a AAA player, nothing more. What are your thoughts on Sajasi and what they should do with him?
I'm chilling on JC. I mean, he's going to be a guy that can probably be on your bench next year. I know we spent a lot of time this year saying, well, they want him to play. They want him to continue to develop. And so that's why he didn't spend the whole season on the big league roster. But I think now that he's kind of had that age 23 season for the most part to be playing in the minors, getting regular opportunities when healthy, and now he's come up and gotten a decent sample size of opportunities in the big leagues. You're going to continue to kind of see what he's capable of being. Hopefully the bat develops into more than what we've seen so far. He had an 847 OPS in Memphis, but 610 through a little bit over 100 plate appearances in St. Louis is not necessarily what you get excited about. Now, those stats are prior to tonight's game. His OPS now up to 619 with the Cardinals, hitting just 237, though. I don't think he's a guy that you necessarily move aside other entrenched starters to make sure he has a spot for going into 2026, because he's not shown offensively that he is that guy just yet. He could become that. I'm not going to count him out, but he's in that next group where, like, if they do decide to get real cheeky and aggressive and maybe they move Gorman and Nootbaar and one other guy, suddenly it's like, okay, they've started to reorganize this roster and this organizational hierarchy. So JC comes in next year as kind of your 10th man, where he can play some third, play some second, play some short, and fill in where needed. But he's not an everyday guy. He's maybe like a 3-week guy and then coming off the bench. That can be a fine place for him. That you need guys that can do that and do it well. You think back to like the Daniel Descalsos, when he was a player, he kind of started out as a guy that you could see coming off the bench. And then he had multiple years as a regular starter for the Cardinals, kind of having to earn his way and show that he could hit enough to do it, but had that versatility with the glove that people liked. Maybe that is an archetype of a player that Sajasi could be in terms of utility, but the more he hits, the more he's going to get opportunities for himself.
So the Cardinals flying out west tonight. They will be taking on the Padres tomorrow. Libby on the bump, 6-8, 4.04 ERA. Lefty against the righty. Pavada for the Padres on the bump, 10-3, 2.81 ERA. A little bit more of some solid numbers there. Libby, again, kind of on that up and down cycle. What do you think is going to happen with this series, looking ahead to the Cardinals just a little bit? I know we don't talk a lot about like what's going on with the season right now because trade deadline, other moves are more important to discuss, but we do still have a couple of months left in the season, and we still have some game to play and some ball to play.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see because the Cardinals are looking to maybe trend in the wrong direction and head back below 500. We haven't really seen that from them for a good long while, but with where they sit right now, they're right at 500, and so a loss in their next game, that is exactly what that would mean. And the Padres are clearly moving in the other direction. Could you see a trade with a team like the Padres before beginning that series? I had seen that there was some interest from them in Jojo Romero. That's a guy that has another year of team control, but certainly if he's got value right now, you maybe think it's as high as it's ever going to be, and you could consider cashing in on that. So as far as the off the field stuff, that's still going to dominate the conversation, as you said, but yeah, it's going to be about getting back down to business. And maybe once they're on the other side of this trade deadline, Sarah, they're going to be able to maybe focus on the things that are in front of them rather than what's behind them. It's going to be easier said than done. And that's kind of where Ollie Marmol, I think, has his work cut out for him over the last 2 months, especially if this sell-off grows from just being Ryan Helsley. If they trade Maton, if they trade JoJo or Steven Matz. Truth Media wants to know if I see a Nootbaar move occurring tomorrow. Probably not. Guy that's on the IL, and again, has probably had that durability concern for this year revisited to where teams are going to be a little hesitant maybe to trade really quality pieces for him. But I think you let guys like him and Gorman play the rest of the season, and then in the offseason, you got to probably pick and choose when it's time for Chaim Bloom to take over. Like, who's going to be in this lineup, who's going to be on this roster, and who could we maybe try to find a way to turn into a starting caliber arm? Because you mentioned it with Libby coming up. He's a guy that, Is he someone you can really pencil in for next year? Sure, but you also have to wonder about workload and health and things of that nature if he's going to be able to hold up. So even some of the guys that are penciled in for a future rotation for the Cardinals, we're kind of seeing in this season the workload's having to be managed.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have final thoughts on anything else that you want to discuss this evening?
Final thoughts is I don't think they should stop there. I do think they should be moving a guy like Phil Maton if he's got some value and be creative. I would love to see a creative move, the type that we're not really expecting. I think we knew that Helsley would get moved. I think at the back of our heads, if we were honest with ourselves, we could have been honest that, man, the return might be a little bit disappointing on paper. Give those prospects some time. Like individually, don't look at them and say, "Oh, they stink," and I'm mad at them because they happen to be involved in this trade that wasn't what I was hoping for. But I think John Mozeliak should stay busy and make some more moves before 5 p.m. tomorrow.
All right. Once again, that's Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Sara Dayley, just along for the ride. In case you missed it, the Birds did fall short tonight, got shut out again by the Marlins. Final score 2-0. They're flying out west tonight to take on the Padres for 3. Then they take on the Dodgers for 3. Then they're off on Thursday and then welcome the Cubbies back to St. Louis and Busch Stadium. So hopefully the temps will be a little cooler. Maybe we'll get some butts and seats. And hopefully, I don't want to say Cubbies fans will migrate down, but you know what I mean by that. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a boost after this series out west. So we appreciate you joining us here once again on Card Central Postgame. We'll be right back at it tomorrow night. So please join us. Subscribe, like, hang out, comment, vent your frustrations. We're here to support it all. Thanks for joining us.